Hey guys, welcome back to Guys Stuff. Today, I'm actually refilming this. This is the second time I've had to make this in a week because YouTube ate one of my videos. One of the great partner tools is we can schedule stuff, so I don't have time to produce on a regular schedule, but when I do, I can do batches of videos. I put them all up and then I schedule them. And this was originally going to air in about 6 weeks, but I thought, I'll give you guys a break between meals type stuff and I'll throw in a dessert. So I changed the schedule date down, and it immediately scrubbed out half the actual video of the video. The audio was still there, but the second half was completely black. And of course, I filmed this a while ago, so I didn't have the original file anymore. So here we go again. Alright, this is a raspberry tres leche cake. Basically, it's a basic vanilla cake combined with 3 milks. We've got condensed milk, evaporated milk, and whole milk. And the cake soaks it all up. It's a really sweet, delicious, very decadent cake, and it's very easy to make. It's inexpensive. There are a couple equipment qualifications that you're going to want to know about. One, it does require, to do it this way, an electric mixer. A stand mixer is best, but if all you have is a hand, you can use one of those too. You just can't use a hand whisk. And that's only because we are going to be whipping up our own frosting and the cake batter. So, if you do not have an electric mixer, not a big deal. You can very easily pick up a boxed cake. Pick up whatever yellow cake mix you prefer, you know, Duncan Hines, Betty Crocker, whatever, just a plain white or yellow cake. That'll do. Won't be quite as good, but it'll do. As far as the frosting goes, you'll see why later, but get the lightest frosting you can, or use a can of whipped cream, which would be the better choice. And you'll see why, like I said, later when I actually put our frosting on. But we'll be making everything here from scratch, and you can see it's very basic ingredients. Really, the most expensive thing is the optional fruit topping. And it's not that expensive if you get them frozen. Unfortunately, I made this first with the fresh fruit, which you can see by the photo and the thumbnail. That was my original that I made. Better looking raspberries, much better. These are frozen, you know, third of the price, but half the size, and frankly not as flavorful as fresh. But, you know, it's the middle of winter here, and the fresh weren't in season to begin with. They cost me like $7 for this amount of fresh raspberries. But they didn't even have any left when I went back, so I had to get these for this video. Not a huge deal, let them thaw, they still taste great. Anyway, the ingredients for this, really simple. A little bit of whole milk, sugar, salt, flour, real vanilla extract, do not use the imitation, spend the extra couple bucks, evaporated milk, sweetened condensed milk, some heavy whipping cream, 1 stick of butter, some baking powder. We'll just need a whisk and a toothpick or a small skewer. Worst case scenario, you can use a fork, but you'll also see why that's not the best option later on. And the most important part, in my opinion, is the baking dish. You are going to need either a glass or a stoneware baking dish. If all you have is a metal one, first I would suggest you go buy at least a glass one. They're not expensive. I got this along with another one for 15 bucks. They're Pyrex brand. You know, they're awesome. The difference is when you bake things in a metal pan, they bake at different rates. The metal conducts the heat differently, and they continue to bake after you take them out. So for anything you do where you want it very even, and that's what we want here, we don't want the crust around the bottom and sides to be thick. We want it to be as even with the inside and consistent all the way around as possible. These allow that to happen. Likewise with things like meatloaf, you don't want a big thick outer crust on your meatloaf. So that's what glass and stoneware does for you. Not that expensive. If you're going to be into cooking or baking, you're going to need one eventually anyway. So, that being said, let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is bake our cake. Really simple to do. Here we go. I forgot to mention one other important ingredient, half a dozen eggs. Obviously need that for the batter. Alright, first step is we're going to lightly butter the sides and bottom of our baking dish, just so the batter won't stick. You don't have to go crazy with it, just make sure you don't miss any spots. Get the sides, get the corners. bottom. Alright. Now the rest of the stick we're going to put in a small bowl and microwave just till it melts, and then let it cool down. So this goes in here. And we'll let this melt. Now we're going to put together our dry ingredients. We can move this out of the way for now. This is really simple. Do about half a teaspoon of salt. Just regular plain old salt. Whatever you got, that's fine. Done with that. Going to do 1 3/4 cup of flour, just regular all-purpose flour, not cake flour. There's a 3/4. And 1. And last but not least, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, not baking soda. Okay. Done with that. Mix this together. Now we're going to do the wet part in the mixer. And this is the part where the stand mixer comes in really helpful. Like I said, you can do it with a hand mixer, an electric hand mixer, but kind of a pain in the butt because this part takes a while. Alright, we need 6 eggs. Garbage bowl. I need a bigger kitchen is what I need. Man, wish I could knock out this wall. I've got a tool room on the other side, which I really love, but I'd almost rather have it be kitchen. Just because I use it more. But I do love my tool room. One more. Alright. Done with the eggs. Let me wash my hand off here. Okay, now we're going to add 3/4 cup sugar to the eggs. And this is simply going to be the base for our cake batter. Now we're going to beat this on high. It's going to take 4 to 5 minutes. And what it'll do is thicken up. Kind of like a meringue, but not quite that thick. We just want to get the eggs and the sugar absolutely well blended in here. And then we'll be adding, slowly, our dry ingredients. Alright, 4 minutes is up. You can see the consistency of it is like a tapioca pudding. kind of in between a thick pudding and like a marshmallow fluff. That's what you want to end up with. This is why the stand mixer is really good. What the whisk does, it does two things to this particular mix. It starts breaking down the protein molecules in the egg yolks, brings the sugar into a solution. At that point, it kind of looks like a custard. And then the last couple minutes, it's whipping in air to give it this volume and the fluff and the texture. And like I said, a hand mixer will do, but you have to be very even. You have to constantly be stirring it with your hand also if you're going to use it. You can't use the kind that just sits there and, you know, like a toilet bowl moves it around. That's no bueno. So keep it moving. Now all we're going to do is put in a teaspoon of our vanilla extract. A little goes along with vanilla, especially the real stuff. Okay. Now we're going to beat this up just for another 10 seconds or so just to mix this in. Now we're ready to slowly put in our dry ingredients. What we want to do is put it on the lowest setting, and we're just going to slowly put in the dry stuff so it doesn't go flying all over. We're still going to get some dust, but there's nothing you can do about that. Alright, now we've got our dry and wet combined. I'm going to take your whisk out, shake off any extra batter. So we want that, it's good stuff. Okay. Now we're going to take that butter we melted, which has cooled off a bit, but it's still melted. Don't want it hot, hot. And we're going to fold it into the mixture with a rubber spatula. And you want to fold it gently. You don't want to stir it in. That would break all that air that we've introduced here. Yeah, come here. There we go. Just slowly put in the butter. And you just scoop it all the way to the bottom, and you're going to be folding over. Just get that incorporated in there. And we're ready to pour into our bowl. Now, one other important thing is you do need to preheat the oven. Sometimes when you're baking stuff, it doesn't matter. Some stuff, it does. You don't want the heat on as much as possible while this is in there. So you want it sitting in there just baking at a nice even temperature. And this is going to be at 350. If you do not have a glass or stoneware and you're using a metal pan, you're going to want to knock that down to 3 1/4 and take off 5 to 10 minutes of the baking time. You're going to have to check it every few minutes at the end, because every non-stick pan, every metal pan is going to be a little different, and it's, like I said, going to cook it unevenly. So you're going to have to manually keep checking it near the end. Now, I know my oven runs just a little bit hot. I'm going to set mine for 28 minutes, but it's going to be right in the half-hour range. Feel free to check it manually with a toothpick, no matter what temp or baking pan you're using. You just want to stick a toothpick in the center of the cake and make sure that it comes back completely clean. Should have a very, very light golden brown on the top when it's done. You don't want, like I said, any kind of thick crust. Rinse your bowl out, because we're going to be using this in about an hour and a half to make our frosting. Alright, so now we just stick in our cake batter, and we'll see it in about a half an hour. Make sure you put it in the center rack, right in the center of the oven. Nice and even. Set my timer here. And I'll check it in 28 minutes. 28 minutes is up. Time to check the cake. Take your toothpick or your skewer, put it right through the middle. Make sure it comes out clean. We're ready to come out. Beautiful. Just starting to turn golden brown. That's exactly what we want. Now, the next step, take your toothpick or skewer, and like I said, worst case scenario, you can use a long fork for this, but we want to gently put lots of holes. Put 4 or 5 every square inch or so all over the cake. Be gentle. You don't want to tear it up. Get all the way to the edges. What this is going to do is allow us to pour our milk mixtures, and it's going to seep into the cake and evenly soak through. If you were just to pour it on top, this crust would prevent it from getting into the cake. Now, you don't want to put too many holes, because that'll make the cake fall apart. So just a few every square inch is all you need. Doesn't take too long. Just make sure you go straight in and straight out. That'll prevent the cake from starting to rip. And you can see why it's important to use small holes. So that's why using a fork isn't really the best option, because you got to go all the way to the bottom of the pan, and in the middle of the cake here, your fork tongs, finger things probably aren't going to be long enough. Alright, this is looking good. The next thing we have to do is mix up our milk, and that's super easy. Just get yourself a bowl, and you're going to need a whisk. There we go, that looks good. Move this back here a bit. Okay, let me grab a bowl. We're going to put in our can of sweetened condensed milk. This is pretty thick. This is why we need a whisk, because we're going to have to combine all these before we dump it on the cake. And, ooh, it's hot. You need to get a spoon to get all of this good stuff out. Has a consistency of a thin pudding. Very nice flavor to it. Great for desserts. Alright, get out of there. Alright, good enough. Now we put in our can of evaporated milk. And 1 cup of regular whole milk. We'll get that out of the fridge. And I should have just enough left here. Perfect. All right. Now we're going to whisk these 3 together in the bowl. Be careful, you don't want to slosh too much around. You just want to combine the thinner milks with that sweetened condensed milk. Otherwise, if you try to pour it over the cake, it doesn't all go evenly. It'll end up with the condensed milk sitting on top. Once it starts to combine, you can just whisk it normally. Okay, now we want to very gently pour it over the cake. The cake is very delicate. It doesn't have that thick crust. So pour it very slowly over the cake. And it'll seep through those holes. And start to soak in. Get the whole cake covered. Now it's going to absorb this. If we measure it right, this should come just up to the top of the cake as we're pouring it. And the cake itself is going to soak it all up. It'll be gone when it cools. Alright, that looks great. Can you tell I've done it a few times? Alright. Now, all we have to do is let this set, give it at least an hour. We want this to come down to room temperature, and then we're going to make our frosting. You never want to do anything with a hot cake. You try to put frosting on this right now, it's going to completely come apart. So we're going to go ahead and let this cool, then we're going to do our frosting, top it with fruit, and we'll be ready to enjoy it. Now that the cake is cooled down, almost to room temperature, nice and cool, so we can work with it, it's time to put on our frosting. We're going to make our own here really simply. For those of you wondering why it's called heavy whipping cream, it's because you can make your own whipped cream with it. You just pour this in your mixer. After you put on your whisk, of course. And after a couple minutes of beating, you've got whipped cream. It's as simple as that. But we don't want whipped cream, we want frosting, so all we have to do is add about 1/4 cup of sugar. As soon as I get a clean cup. There we go. Pour that in. And we just kick this on, bring it up to speed slowly so it doesn't slosh around a lot. And it's not going to take long. It'll just come up just like a normal whipped cream out of a can. That's the texture and consistency we're going for here. And that's all there is to making frosting and or whipped cream. Go ahead and get our whisk out here. There we go. Okay. Now what we're going to do is glop it onto the cake. You don't want to try to smear it or spread it because the cake is very, very fragile. Kind of like the consistency of a Twinkie at this point, except it's wet. So you gotta be careful. We're just gonna blop it on evenly over the cake. Doesn't have to be super even. Frosting has a nice bit of thickness to it. After you chill it, it's going to be even better. Alright, so that's a good majority of the frosting here. Good enough. Just lightly move it over and cover most of the cake. Just be gentle so you don't tear the actual cake apart. There we go. Alright, that looks great. Now we can add whatever topping we choose. Get off there. Okay. I chose raspberries. You can go with whatever you like or eat it plain. It's designed to eat as is. So it's completely up to you what you like with it. Now, like I said, my first video, I used fresh raspberries. They are a lot better. They have that natural tartness that mixes very well with the sweetness of the cream and the milks. These frozen raspberries, they're not bad, but they're sweetened. They taste more like a candy raspberry. So, it's a different taste. Still good. Not quite the same. If you can find fresh, definitely go with fresh. And of course, they're a lot bigger too. The first one I did, they were so big, only fit about 4 raspberries per piece. These guys are, I mean, some of these are just shredded bits. I don't know where they're getting them. Frozen stuff is great for making in stuff, like if you're doing a pie or jam or something. But not quite the same for a topping. Alright, so there we go. Nothing left to do now but cut it up. Let me rinse my hand off here. Cut it up and serve it. It smells really good. There we go. Alright. First piece is always a little hard getting out, but I will do my best. Let's see how we look. Let's try a corner. Or not. Let's try the middle. Get under there with the spatula. There we go. Beautiful. So there you are. Raspberry Tres Leches. Easy, inexpensive, very delicious. Have fun with it. Thanks for watching, guys. Stuff. We'll see you next time.